Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.
Hello and welcome to Behind the Mirror of Music. My name is Dannii Cohen. This week's guest is Nathaniel Stampley. Nathaniel Stampley performed the role of Mufasa in The Lion King on Broadway and the West End, Old Deuteronomy in the Broadway revival of Cats, as well as starring as leading man in Sweeney Todd, Gypsy, Men of Mancha, Porgy and Bess, Lempicka, and many more. I hope you will enjoy the show.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon to you too. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm well too, thank you. What are you up to right now?
I am currently playing the role of Herbie in Gypsy at the Marriott Theater, which is in the Chicago area here in the United States.
It's a wonderful show.
Yes.
I mean, you recently finished a run as Sweeney Todd. It's a dream role for many male singers. What was the experience like for you?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was a dream role for me too, previous to the show, and I wasn't sure when or where I would play the role, but I'm glad I finally got the opportunity. Um, it was in Washington, D.C. at the Signature Theater, which is known for doing a lot of Sondheim shows, and it was fantastic. It was a great way. It was my first one and one that was really special.
How did you approach the character of Sweeney?
Oh, great question. I think the biggest thing I really thought about is instead of the rage and the vengeance, I really thought about him being hurt and the loss of his family and his and wanting to correct the injustice that was done to him. And so, instead of being wild and maniacal, I really just thought about really, most of us, if we're hurt to the core of who we are, we're capable of extraordinary things. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. And so that was more of my approach than anything else.
And what is it like to sing Sondheim music? Is it a special experience?
Yeah, Sondheim, there's always more than what's on the page. And so sometimes a lot of his songs sometimes have repetition um with a twist to it. Some could be quite lengthy, and in Sweeney's case, the vocal range was a challenge as well. But yeah, I just think the biggest thing about Sondheim is that he was so smart. May he rest in peace. He was so smart and full of so much information and so many clues and hints in the music or in the text and there's always more than one way to perform his music. Um, some people argue that he's the Shakespeare of musical theater.
I hear that a lot. I think it's true in a way because his work is so unique.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really dense. Like I said, there's always more than what you first hear or even first read on the page. And the more you dig, the more you can find out. So, someone could play any of the roles from his wonderful canon of work for years, and I'm sure every production you could find 5 to 10 new things every time you could play it. So I look forward to, my next Sondheim role.
No, with Gypsy, he wrote the lyrics, so there's still a part of Sondheim there.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of turn of phrase and really witty and funny lyrics throughout the entire show. And I'm just amazed at this wonderful piece.
What made you fall in love with music and acting?
Yeah, my mother is a singer, and I grew up in the Black Pentecostal church here in the United States, and my mom was the pianist and the organist, and so and I am the oldest of 6 children, and we've always sang in the house and at church all the time. And so I've been singing, I think, since I've been walking. But what's interesting is I never really thought that you could make a career out of making music because I only sang in church. And then it wasn't until I got into grade school and was introduced to different types of music that I realized, oh, there are other genres of music and there are other ways to express yourself, and that this can be a profession. And I'm forever grateful for my mom because I've been trying my whole life to sing as well as she can. So she set a high bar for me early on.
What's your first professional role?
Uh, my first professional role, I was actually in the ensemble or in the chorus, the opera chorus of Porgy and Bess at it was a local opera company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, called the Florentine Opera, and they needed younger people in the show, and I was still in high school, which was probably around age 15 or 16, and to be in this room with all these amazing singers from all around the country, I was just so impressed, and I was like, "Wow, I can't believe I'm here." And then so there were times I was go to school and then go to rehearsal after school, and it was fantastic, and it really changed my life and trajectory of my life.
A role that I think means a lot to you is Mustafa in The Lion King because it made a big difference in your private life too, I believe.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I met my wife on we were on the first national tour of the Lion King here in the States. And I started out in the ensemble, and she was one of the incredible dancers in the show. And we hit it off from day one, first day of rehearsals. And and I've literally been in awe of her for many, many years now. We've been married 19 years.
Fantastic.
Yes, and we have 2 wonderful children.
Saw these pictures of your anniversary recently with the Lion King look. It was really beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, what's wonderful about The Lion King is that it's a show that means a lot to audiences all over the world. There are many companies around the planet. But also when you do the show, you're a part of a much larger community of actors and dancers. And with the Lions, the family is called a pride, and so your pride now extends not just here in the States, but also in the UK and Australia and all around the world. And as many people, there are many, many actors and dancers that have done the show, but we're the only ones that really know the intricacies of what it takes to do the show. And I'm really grateful. I got to perform in 4 companies of The Lion King. I got to do it on the first national tour. I got to do it in the UK on the West End. I also came back to the States. I did the show. I did the second tour, and then my last stop was on Broadway, and that was my longest stint.
This show that me indeed means a lot to people. It's been in Netherlands too a few times. It's all
Yes.
sold out.
Yeah, yeah. Interestingly enough, when I was on the tour, um, I was on the first tour, I was a Mufasa understudy. I was in the ensemble, and I was also a Scar understudy. And I actually went on more for Scar than I did Mufasa. And eventually, there was a role I had put in my notice to leave the show. I wanted to try some other things, and they presented me with the opportunity to actually come to the Netherlands. They asked me, they said, "Hey, do you want to learn Dutch?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll learn the show in Dutch." And eventually that didn't work out, but they said, "There's another opening now in the UK on the West End. Do you want to do that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's even better." So I so maybe we would have met Dannii
Yes.
many years ago.
We just played another feline in Cats.
Yes, old Deuteronomy. Yes. Oh, I had a great time with that. Oh my gosh. You know, Cats is one of those shows that I thought, it had passed me by. There was a time where, Cats was on Broadway for many, many years, and then it wasn't. And I wasn't sure it was ever going to come back. And I auditioned for the revival, and I didn't get it initially. And then a friend of mine, he left the show, and he got another show on Broadway, and there was an opening for the show, so I auditioned again, and they got me in. So I was able to say I've done Cats, one of the most famous and amazing shows, in the history of Broadway. And so now I'm part of that wonderful legacy.
We also did Man of La Mancha. It's one of my favorites.
Ah, yes.
I actually always wanted to play the role of Don Quixote.
Yeah, yeah. What's interesting is that one of the people that I look up to the most in this business is Brian Stokes Mitchell, and to me, he's such a high standard for leading men, especially for baritones and for Black men in this business. And he's broken a lot of barriers and opened a lot of doors for many people. And I feel like I'm one of those people. So um, pretty much any show that he's done, I've always wanted to do. And so I wanted to do Man of La Mancha simply because he had played the role on Broadway in a revival, and the opportunity just never really came my way. I kept auditioning for different companies, and it never happened. And then one day I got a call, and I had the opportunity to I was doing a show at Milwaukee Rep. I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the artistic director, he asks me, he says, "Hey, is there a show you want to do?" I said, "Well, I've never really shared this with anybody other than my wife, but I've always wanted to play Don Quixote in Man of La Mancha." He's like, "Oh my gosh, that's the show we had in mind for you." I said, "Really? Oh my gosh, this is exciting." So I booked that show, and this was like more than a year in advance. And then some months go by, and then my agents call me and they say, "Hey, there's an audition for Man of La Mancha in Chicago. Would you want to audition for that?" I said, "Sure." And believe it or not, I ended up booking that gig, and in a year span, I ended up playing the same role, Don Quixote, 3 months back to back. So for 6 months, I got to play Don Quixote. And the first one was in Chicago, and literally we closed on a Sunday, and then that following Tuesday was the first day of rehearsals in Milwaukee for that second production. And so it's amazing what you can manifest if you really believe and really want something. Sometimes it can come to you double fold, and that's what happened that time. So whenever I think of La Mancha, I just think, man, those were 6 months of just absolute joy for me.
What is it in the story in Don Quixote that attracts you to the part?
Well, it's several things. One of them is, as in musical theater, I'm a baritone. I'm not a tenor. I'm not a even an alto. Some of these roles now are sit very high in the voice, and so it's important that I sort of check off all the boxes and all the baritone roles that are written, which for the most part are roles really written in the like 30, 40 years ago. And because everything now is written fairly high for tenors and even higher voices, which can be a little difficult for me to navigate sometimes. And so that's one thing that, it's just an iconic baritone role. Secondly, I mentioned, because Brian Stokes Mitchell did it, so that just automatically makes me want to do it, made me want to do it. And then thirdly, it's such an intricate, it's such an interesting show because you really are playing three different characters. There's Miguel Cervantes, the author of the trilogy of Don Quixote, and then there's Alonso Quijana, who is the older man, and then there is Don Quixote, who is the figment of Alonso Quijana's imagination. And in the play, in the musical throughout the show, you are playing sometimes all three characters at one time. If you that isn't too confusing to understand. And so I loved that so much. And then the score itself was really, really fantastic. And a lot of the other ideas in the show, many of the other characters are fun to play opposite. Any Sancho is going to be funny. And then the major idea of the show is that we can make the world better, and that even in the midst of cruelty and violence and anger, if we set our aims higher, we might actually achieve something that could seem impossible. And as much as we would like to paint, Alonso Quijana as some crazy old man, like these are just wonderful ideas that the entire world should aspire to. Is that to see beauty in everyone and everything. So all of that makes it worth your while if you get to see the show or even be in the show.
Absolutely true. As I said, I always loved this show because of that story and because of the passion behind the story as well. Because I think it will remain timeless forever.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope it's done from now to the end of time.
You said a while back about shows being written for increasingly higher voices. Why do you think that is? Because I actually think the baritone is one of the most beautiful male voices.
Thank you very much. All the baritones around the world are nodding our head in agreement with that, I'm sure. I don't know. It actually is really interesting. In the if you look at Western music, a lot of especially like in the opera world, the lower voices sometimes can be the villain or the father character or something like that, or even nobility. Um, and the higher voices tend to be the more heroic and the protagonists of a lot of shows and operas. And so interestingly enough, we're actually coming back to an older idea of like the castrati being around, and that these were males that could seem extremely high, what we would traditionally consider in the woman's register and voice range, and some of them would still have the power of the male voice. And so I, you know, there is something in everyone's historic DNA that gravitates towards higher voices. That just is how Western music, came from, and maybe is evolving back to. I'm not sure, but it is exciting to hear higher notes, and I think yeah, I get the appeal. I really do, and we hear it in a lot of pop music. A lot of most pop singers are really tenors and even higher. Even if you listen to radio now, any popular music, you don't really hear lower voices, and I'm not sure if it doesn't play well on the radio, or I don't know. But there is something still there for even lower voices in the female voice, and for males, that I think is appealing. It just there's enough for everyone, I feel like, but right now, especially in musical theater, things are tending higher and higher.
I think it's a shame because I like the variation in voices. It's not just high, but low and everything in between. It's just such nice. Like you can hear it in the original recording of Cats, all those different voices.
Yeah. And it's almost as if things are just getting more homogenized, and that everyone wants everything to be high. So then, if show number one was a hit, then we got to make sure everything is high and sits really high, and then it sort of just keeps replicating itself, versus people reaching back and saying, oh, these lower voices, that like Rodgers and Hammerstein, or even older musicals, there was space for everyone. That is not, some of us are getting squeezed out, unfortunately.
Real shame.
Yeah. Yeah, but things also come in cycles. So this is just where we are right now. I think, I think that's also why revivals are always really important, in each new Broadway season, or wherever shows are done around the world. Revivals are an opportunity for people to hear what musical theater used to be or has been, and it's exciting in a very different way.
I was thinking, did you ever hear the Copert and Jest event? Because that's a baritone role. You might be interested.
Yeah, I've auditioned for that show a couple of times, and who knows, maybe one day I might get a chance to do that one. But yeah, that one is a beautiful score, and I hope to get a crack at it one of these days.
What are some of the other roles you would like to do or hope to do?
Great question, Dannii. Honestly, Sweeney was my last one that I had on my bucket list. So I'm in the process of creating a new bucket list, because, I'm not sure if bucket list reads to all of your international audience, but it's a list of things you've always wanted to do. So I'm creating a new list, and some of them involve new shows that I'm in currently, or working on, like workshops or readings, and yeah, I just have to create a new list. And the one thing I always share with people is that I try not to talk about things too much publicly. I'll just always say, "You'll see it when I get it." And so you'll see it.
Out of all the roles you've already have done, what are some of your favorites besides the ones we've already discussed?
Yeah, I mean, I have to mention Cole House in Ragtime. That is a role that I've dreamt of playing. The show came out when I was still in high school, and oh man, I love that show. ragtime, and you know, a lot of complicated history with politics and a racial dynamic here in the U.S. With some historical fiction mixed in there. That's a great role. Great score. A lot of great characters in there. Another role would be the role of Robert Kincaid in The Bridges of Madison County, that by Jason Robert Brown. An incredible score. You know, Robert is a great character. He gets some of the best music in the show. But interestingly enough, he only has one scene partner throughout the show, and it's the role of Francesca. And it's just, if anyone ever gets a chance, you really should listen to that score of The Bridges of Madison County. It's just fantastic. And that one is a role I didn't really have on my radar, and I was never aware of, and I auditioned for it and just fell in love with the role, the music, the story, and those are two of my favorites for sure. Two of my favorites for sure.
Some of your best stage memories.
Oh wow. I have some great memories. I think the very first time I climbed Pride Rock and looked out over, you know, to the audience, which should have been the Pride Lands. But for me, it was actually just looking out into the audience. The first time I ever did that just blew me away. Like I almost was overcome with all of the emotions, because this was a dream come true to play the role of Mufasa, to have, you know, a young actor, playing young Simba right next to me, and just looking out and just saying, you know, everything the light touches is our kingdom. And you just think, wow, that is amazing. And it just, so many things, like the movie is so incredible, and just thinking about my journey of what it took for me to get from a small town like Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to you know, make it on to a Broadway stage. It's like sometimes you just have a out of body experience where you can see yourself looking out, and it that's actually something I'll never forget. Another wonderful memory is the first time I went on for Coal House. I was on the tour of Ragtime, and I went on for Coal House, and I was so nervous. Oh my gosh, I was so nervous. And I was equally nervous and happy and excited. And my friends were happy for me in the cast. I had family come. We were playing in Michigan at the time. I had a lot of friends come to visit. And so I was just so excited. Just that energy was something I'll never forget. I'll never forget that. And I mean, I have hundreds of stories, Dannii. I don't know how much time you have.
I would love to hear these stories all the time, because but it always feels so exciting to hear an actor talk about his work when he really loves it.
Okay. Well, I'll share one more then. The very first time, this is a funny one actually. The very first time, so I was in the revival, and the Tony Award winning revival of the Gershwin's Porgy and Bess on Broadway, and I played the role of Robbins, and I was also a Porgy understudy. And we had just left Boston, and we had just come into New York for our run, and I hadn't had any understudy rehearsals once we got to New York. And Norm Lewis was the Porgy, and he was playing opposite Audra McDonald. And Norm, I usually get dressed, really early so that I can warm up and be in costume. And, this was the 5-minute call. So 5 minutes before places or beginners. And I get a call from stage management to go to stage management. And I'm so nervous. I'm like, oh, what did I do? Like, is everything okay? And as I'm talking to them, they're literally taking off my Robin's costume and they're putting on the Porky costume. They said, Norm isn't here right now. He's stuck on a train. You're gonna go on. I was like, what? And so I get it. So I'm starting to get dressed, and they said, you want us to do anything? And I said, please just call my wife and tell her I'm going on this afternoon. This was a matinee. And so in the show, if you know the show at all, Robbins, he gets killed in Act 1, and his death is what actually brings Porgy and Bess together. And so there's this wonderful funeral procession and song that's called "My Man's Gone Now," that Serena Robbins sings about him. But the body is there on the table. So that was me. And so I actually had never seen that part of the show because I was always the dead guy on the table. And so right before we were and so Porgy is bringing Bess to this funeral. And right before we go out, Audra, she turns to me, she's like, okay, do you know what's happening next? I said, Audra, I have no idea. I've only heard it almost like a radio show, but I'd never seen it. And so she's just like, okay, we'll get through it. We'll get through it. And so everyone's just sort of pushing and pulling me around in the scene, where to go. And I knew all the lines and I knew all the music. I just had no idea what the staging looked like. So that's one I actually will always hold dear to my heart.
Is there something you would like to add or include in this interview that haven't been mentioned?
The one thing I will say is that for any young artists that are out there, and even older artists, it really doesn't matter where you are age-wise, what have you. If you're interested in this, in pursuing a career in musical theater, go for it. Go for it. The world is big and wide enough for all of us to be successful at whatever we want to do and to achieve, and that we all have stories to share, and we all have many different backgrounds. And I think it's important that different types of people, regardless of your ethnic background or where you're from, to be on stage, everyone wants to see a part of themselves somewhere on stage. So whether it's an age or background or demographic, all of that really counts. And it's important that, all of our stories are told. So traditionally, there's only been certain types of people that were held higher than others. And I think now everyone is open to many types of different people, even if there are differently abled people on stage, and that people are open to everything, because humanity is wide and vast, and all of us aren't the same type of people. And so it's important that all of these stories get told with all types of people. And the other thing I'll offer too is, don't be scared. It's okay. You're going to fail, and it's in the failure that you get a chance to grow. And so, all the shows that we got a chance to talk about in this interview, for every one show we talked about, there were at least 20 to 30 other shows that I didn't get. And those are shows that, we never really talk about what the success rate of auditioning versus actually booking a gig is, but because everyone sees all the yeses, but no one sees the no's, and the no's are private. And so I just offer for any artists that are out there, even if you're a poet or a novelist or a sculptor or a dancer, any of this stuff, you're going to get rejected, but that isn't, we are not what we do. We are who we are. We get to do whatever our chosen field is. And so if people reject our art, that's okay, because that's the subjective. Art is very subjective. But you have to keep going, because there will be someone that says yes to you. And the big thing is, are you still going to be available when that yes comes around? And so that's why I always just say to people, just hang in there, just stick in the game, stay in the game, because at some point you are going to get an opportunity. The question is, are you going to be prepared for it? So sometimes in our no's, it's a time to actually prepare for the next thing. And sometimes when those things don't appear, then you have to create your own art and go for it, because we need all types of stories told by many different people. And so it's a rewarding career. I love musical theater. I've worked with many artists all over the world and that are dear friends to me. And I've gotten to travel the world performing. And so I'm forever grateful for that. But I also want to just remind people also, it's not just all opening night parties and meeting celebrities and signing autographs. There's a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice that is done. And most of that hard work is done in private. So there's a reason why we rehearse closed from the public. The press isn't there. No one knows how difficult or easy some things are. People just celebrate the finished product. And that's a good thing, because in the rehearsal room is really private, and you really learn a lot about yourself, the director, choreographer, the composers if they're around, and the music direction team. Like, all of that is what makes musicals special. When you're doing a play, there's the text and the director and the actors in the room. But when there's a musical, sometimes there's dance, sometimes there's always music involved. And so that just means there's a lot more collaboration. And so the collaborative nature of musical theater is so exciting. And it can be really rewarding and fulfilling. But just also remember too, that we are who we are, not what we do. And so sometimes, you're even going to hear not so nice things said or written about you in print and with reviews or whatever. I try not to read them for at least 5 to 10 years, but I do read them. I do get to reading them, because we're all entitled to our opinion. And so if you think about it in a theater, everyone in the audience has an opinion about what they're seeing. And those opinions are valid because they're theirs. But that doesn't mean that me as the performer, I have to accept everyone's opinion about what I'm doing. My job is to just do my best that day and to be honest on stage as best I can. And then the rest is whatever happens. I can't control anything beyond that. So I know that was a lot to share, but just some of my thoughts. It's just a wonderful, wonderful business, and filled with incredible artists and courageous artists, and support live arts is really important.
It's a beautiful message.
Thanks. I hope that helps. I hope that helps someone. If it helps one person, then that's a good thing. And I try to think about that too in my performances, is that, everybody may not like what I do on stage, and that's okay. But if I can have a great impact on one person, then my job is done. I've done my job, and I've gotten wonderful notes and messages online, personal written letters, just saying how impactful some performances I've been a part of have been, and that warms my heart, because that means a lot to me. Sometimes that's more than even a standing ovation.
Thank you so much for this conversation.
Oh, thank you, Dannii. I appreciate you reaching out to me, and to all the listeners and viewers. All the best to you, and Dannii, keep doing your wonderful work. Musical theater is quite rewarding for all of us, those on stage and those off stage. And so, thank you for putting us on the forefront.
Thank you so much. Well, always love theater, and I hope this show will well mean something to people out there, bring theater closer again.
Yeah, I hope so too, because theater only works if we're all in the same room. And that's the special dynamic of audiences and performers. The audience has a role to play and the actors have a role to play, and then we all get in the room together and we play our parts out, and it's a special thing. Thank you so much, Dannii. Be well.
Thank you. Bye.
Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.